All right, today we're tackling a beast of a book, Fleming Rutledge's The Crucifixion. And this thing is more than just theology. It's a powerful, full-throated attempt to reclaim the absolute center of the Christian faith. Let's dive in.
So, right off the bat, you gotta ask yourself, how does a book that's almost 700 pages long, focusing on a single event from 2,000 years ago, become a must-read, a modern classic for so many people right now? What's going on here? Well, for one thing, just look at who's talking about it. When a major voice like Bishop Robert Barron says it's one of the most stimulating and thought-provoking books he's read in a decade, you pay attention. And notice, he doesn't just say it's smart. He talks about its preaching power, its ability to make this ancient story feel immediate and urgent today. So what is that urgent message? Well, Rutledge kicks things off by diagnosing a huge problem with how we tend to look at the central symbol of Christianity. Here it is, the core concern that drives the whole book. Rutledge argues that the cross has been tamed. It's been domesticated. We've sanded off all the rough edges, softened it into this gentle, generic symbol that has lost its shock, its power, and its world-altering seriousness. And this really gets at the disconnect, doesn't it? On one hand, you have the tamed cross. We see it maybe on a piece of jewelry, and we think love. But Rutledge forces us to look at the historical reality. Crucifixion was a state-sponsored tool designed for maximum public shame, for terror, for utter degradation. It was brutal and obscene. And if you don't get that horror, she says, you can't possibly get the real meaning. So to really understand the cross, Rutledge argues we have to go back to square one. We have to rebuild the entire foundation and reclaim the scandal and seriousness that the first people who saw it would have felt in their bones. And she rebuilds this foundation with 4 cornerstones. First up is primacy. This idea that Christ crucified isn't just a theme in the gospel. It is the interpretive center of the whole thing. Then there's godlessness, the mind-bending paradox that God's true power is shown in what looks like total abandonment and failure. Third, justice. This isn't God just shrugging his shoulders at evil. It's God actively and powerfully setting the world right. And finally, sin. Rutledge insists we see sin not just as a list of bad things we do, but as a capital P power, an enslaving force that has humanity in its grip. Okay, so with that groundwork laid, Rutledge gets to the real heart of her project, which is to explore the incredibly rich and diverse ways the Bible itself tries to explain what the cross means. And this is such a key idea in her book. She insists the Bible doesn't give us one single, tidy atonement theory. That's not how it works. Instead, it gives us a whole chorus of powerful images and metaphors or motifs. And she argues that the moment we try to silence one of those voices to focus on our favorite, we actually make the cross smaller. The first voice in that chorus is Passover. Think of the cross as the ultimate Exodus story. This isn't just about forgiving my personal guilt. It's about God staging a massive rescue operation to liberate an entire people from bondage, from slavery, and create a whole new community, just like he did for Israel in Egypt. Next up is the motif of sacrifice. And look, Rutledge knows a lot of us get squeamish when we hear talk about blood sacrifice, but she leans right into it. Her point is that this language is there to show us that redemption isn't cheap. It's incredibly costly, precisely because the evil and sin it's dealing with are so deadly serious. Then you've got the image of ransom. This one frames the whole event as this dramatic rescue mission. Humanity is held captive, not just by our bad habits, but by these massive, enslaving forces, the powers of sin and death. So the cross isn't just an internal moral reset, it's a costly, dramatic act of liberation from a very real enemy. So we've got this beautiful chorus of images: Passover, sacrifice, ransom, they're all singing. But Rutledge argues that there's one overarching theme, one grand story that can hold them all together and make sense of the entire symphony. And that keystone, that master theme, is Christus Victor, Christ the victor. In this picture, the crucifixion is actually the decisive battle in a cosmic apocalyptic war. God isn't losing on the cross, he's winning. He is striking the final decisive blow against all the powers that hold creation in bondage: sin, death, and every form of systemic evil you can imagine. And this is where it all comes together. See, Christus Victor isn't just another motif on the list. For Rutledge, it's the grand apocalyptic story that provides the frame for everything else. Within this epic story of God's victory, ransom makes sense. It's the liberation of the prisoners of war. Sacrifice makes sense. It's the immense cost of that victory. It all just clicks into place. Now, this is where things get really fascinating, especially when we talk about the most controversial idea of all, substitution. Rutledge is very critical of what she calls crude penal substitution, that picture of a furious father pouring out his wrath on his son. But, and this is crucial, she doesn't throw the idea of substitution out. No way. Instead, she reframes it as vicarious substitution. Christ isn't a whipping boy. He's our champion, our representative, fighting the battle for us, in our place, so that his victory becomes our victory. Okay, that's some deep, heavy theology, but let's bring it home. What's the practical takeaway? Why does digging up this ancient, harsh, and victorious vision of the cross actually matter for us today? Well, at the end of the day, Rutledge's book is a powerful antidote to a kind of sentimental, watered-down Christianity. It puts the strangeness, even the offense, back into the cross. It pushes back hard against any attempt to trivialize sin or judgment. It reminds us that salvation is a rescue from real-world systemic evil, not just a feeling of inner peace. Her challenge really is for us to preach and believe the whole biblical cross, not just the parts that make us feel comfortable. And that leaves us with a huge, challenging question to chew on. If Fleming Rutledge is right, if the cross is really God's victory over the enslaving powers of the world, then what are those powers in our world today? What systems, what ideologies, what injustices does this victorious, brutal cross call us to confront right now? And that, right there, is what makes this book so much more than theology. It's a vital, living challenge for our time.